Regan Slaymaker for Radiant.Green. I have the pleasure to be joined by the Director of Recom Technologies, Jon Camp. Jon, how are you today?
I'm fine. Good to speak to you. Hi there, Regan.
You too, yes, you too. I thought we'd kind of jump straight into it and kind of go into kind of, for those that don't know, what do Technologies do, and who are you guys in the solar industry space?
Okay, so Recom is a leading and, as far as I'm aware, the only Bluebird Tier 1 PV module manufacturer in Europe. All our products are designed and engineered in our European offices. We pride ourselves on being innovative and proactive and anticipating trends and changes in the market. The success of Recom is largely due to the quality of our products and our commitment to adopt new technologies, strategies, and ideas. We bring the latest technology to our consumers, and that's very much a driving force for the team that look to see those new technologies. Recom are proud to distribute, we would like to say quite openly, the very best in the renewable energy solutions to the UK market. Our panels outperform both in linear performance warranties and in product warranties as well.
Perfect. Obviously, you've mentioned kind of all the innovative kind of advancements you guys have made, and obviously with that, it goes without saying, it's kind of helped you guys. The current there's a current solar boom at the moment where the investment in solar PV is rising, and the supply and demand is rising as well. In your opinion, kind of what factors have allowed the solar industry to boom in the way it has? Is it because companies like yourself are creating so many advancements in the technologies?
Well, I think there's obviously a few answers there. I think the first one, the recent solar boom, is it's indeed provided a significant boost to Recom and the renewable energy sector as a whole. The growing interest in clean solutions, we're seeing that a greater interest in what Recom and its products and its services can bring to the table. From a UK point of view, as the distributor for UK products, we're committed really to look at the lessening of humanity's dependence on fossil fuel, overcome the global imbalances, and halt the degradation of our environment. Obviously, very important that people start recognizing that we've got to take the situations that we find ourselves with the global warming, etc. We've got to take it seriously. We've got to think about the future. Sustainability is a very much a key factor for us as a company. It's something that's very close to my heart. I come from the oil and gas industry originally, and I'd like to think was one of the pioneers in the industry about ensuring that refining products were being cleaned and they were reducing CO2 emissions. And something I started 6 or 7 years ago, I know is being fully developed in that industry. So, from a personal crusade, I want to try and make sure that we focus on that, and I'll be speaking about that at the show. I'll talk about that later. We do pursue and implement the most sustainable solutions everywhere within our operations, from manufacturing methods to technologies, choice of production materials, waste disposal and recycling. And waste disposal and recycling are pretty important. We need to be thinking about them. I was looking at some statistics the other day, and it said that in 2016, it was estimated that there were around 250,000 metric tons of solar waste globally. The concern is that by 2050, that would have grown to 9.57 million tons. So, we've got to be thinking about the way we produce and everything else, and kind of making sure that we think about the future.
Definitely. Obviously, you mentioned kind of it's not just the technologies there, but I'm going to kind of go that kind of enforce kind of this positive sustainability kind of, as you said, I want to say crusade, as you said it, I like that word, but kind of I am going to go against that. But in your opinion, kind of what technology has found itself to be most important when decarbonising and this mass uptake of solar as well?
Oh, well, I think, look, the most significant thing that can be said is there's in every industry, regardless of what it is, as in life, there's a constant evolution. We are accelerating so quickly in technology. And in the last 10 years, the development of far more efficient and cost-effective PV solar panels and the technological advancements which continue to drive, I think helping the whole industry's expansion. There are so many different factors when it comes to technology. Panels are now far more efficient than they've ever been before. There are numerous technologies: thin film technology, bifacial panels, tandem solar cells. There are now solar tracking systems, smart inverters, which optimize, the DC power generated, and all these things. So, I think we have to accept and acknowledge that technology will be the forefront of any industry. And at this moment, given the impetus of solar and the recognition that, there's a place for it in the market, it can only get better. I'm sure, 10 years' time, things that we think are revolutionary now will be seen as antiquated and they'd have found something else. So, yeah, it's a very, very exciting time. I mean, solar is really taking off. I think the summits that we've seen over the last few years have given everybody more of awareness, and there's a massive acceptance that solar is the way forward. So, with that in mind, it's a bit like going to the stars. Everyone's pushing to get to the stars. They'll find different ways and find new technologies to get them there. I think it will be the same with solar.
Perfect. I mean, that is a great answer. I love that. Well, you mentioned kind of it's an industry that's evolving all the time. Kind of, you mentioned everyone's pushing to the stars, kind of find that new technologies. But when obviously making these quick advancements and innovations all the time, what have kind of Recom Technologies found maybe particularly demanding or challenging when developing these new technologies and making sure they're always one step ahead?
Well, I think the honest answer to that is what I need to do is get one of our technical team to sit there, because they'll know better the factors that affect them and broaden their horizons as well. I think the most important thing to recognise, the market has seen a huge increase in the competition, and new companies seem to be entering literally all the time. I mean, when I joined Recom 6 months ago and getting us ready for launching literally this week, looking at the landscape, it was like, wow, there's not too much competition. But in 6 months, I would think I've seen an additional 30 companies come into the marketplace. So, that in itself puts pressure, because it means to stay in front of the competition, you've got to find the new technologies and the new ways of developing your product. So I think that's it's because it's so much more competitive, and you need to demonstrate what your USP is. And I think that's very important, and that's very challenging to the techie guys. I think the other thing from a UK perspective is that the Recom brand is very recognised in Europe and around the world. That's where it's focused on over the last 20 odd years. And for us, there's a lot of work to do to introduce the brand into the UK. I think it's fair to say that the UK market has had a slightly slower adoption to renewable energy than other European countries, and I'm going to throw the rest of the world, particularly America, which is really accelerating its attitude towards solar, and there's a lot of things happening there. We have relied heavily on fossil fuels and energy generation. I think what has helped Recom, as it's helped our competition, is the fact that the UK government, and although you could argue that recently it's had a slight backward step, but it's still very much incentivized to building and the adoption of these new energy solutions, of which solar clearly is one of those. So those incentives, those the things that the government are going to put in place is going to help. Clearly, people understand what solar brings, but at the same time, and go back to your question, how have we found it demanding? The demand is to always try and be ahead of everybody else, in what is an extremely competitive market. So, that's what our techie guys are doing all the time. It's interesting hearing their thoughts on the future. So we'll wait and see what transpires.
Definitely. I mean, I think one thing that everyone's saying in these interviews that it is a very exciting time, and especially kind of when more international companies that are branching out into the UK, like you guys are, they're always saying that the UK market, whilst it's like you said, it's catching up a little bit. It's just an incredibly exciting time in the market with all this, like you said, 30 companies in the space of 6 months have introduced themselves into the market.
I think another important thing I've just got to say this is, having come from a different industry and into this one, I think one of the problems that we have in the UK is the word solar, because the word solar immediately means sun, and we're not renowned for having the most sunniest of climates. And I have spoken to numerous people, and I've asked them, what do you know about solar and solar panels? And the answer has always been, well, it's all right if you live in Spain or Italy or, in southern France where the sun's shining all the time. So there is an education that needs to take place, because people are a little bit ignorant as to the technology, and they're a little bit ignorant to what the cells do. They don't need direct sunlight. In fact, hot sun is not good for a solar PV panel. So, I think there's some education to go on, and people need to sort of get a better understanding. But no doubt, I think the most important thing is the UK is catching up. Unfortunately, the circumstances of that aren't nice. The Ukrainian war obviously has caused an energy crisis, and because of that, people are looking for different forms of energy and reduce their prices, and solar fits into that box. But I think the important thing is to say that people's understanding of what solar is, and there's a lot more media attention to it as well, and that's very important. So we're catching up very quickly.
Definitely. And I did read Solar Energy report Solar Energy UK done about kind of educating, or like demystifying some things that people think are truths, and they're actually not. So I'll put that in the description as well.
Well, if you would be so kind, if you can tell them to go onto my LinkedIn, I have been doing some I'd like to think reasonably interesting articles just about getting rid of some of the myths, and trying to give people a little bit better understanding, and asking some questions about solar. So if you get a chance to do that, or go onto our website, it'll give you a bit of background as well.
I've said this now. Jon Camp's LinkedIn will be in the description, so make sure you guys it all click on that. I do want to touch on, obviously you mentioned kind of earlier that kind of with the technologies and the challenges and stuff, bringing one of the kind of the more technical guys at Recom, but now I want to touch on kind of something that you're speaking about at the at Solar and Storage. We won't give too much away in this because we want people to watch your presentation, Jon. But kind of, I do want to touch on the environmental and social governance topics, and kind of tell me what are Recom focusing on regarding ESG.
Okay, so let's be very clear that we talk about myths and whatever. ESG is something which I can honestly say was only brought to my attention about 2 years ago. 5 years ago, no one was talking about it. So I think the first positive is people are understanding what the environmental issues are, the social impact that it has, and more importantly, how you govern it. Because this is the important thing. You can talk for any, you can talk loads and loads about what you want to do, but the governance is the most key and essential part. So from our point of view, and understandably, I'm going to make a statement you would expect. We are committed to implementing environmentally sustainable practices throughout our business, reducing carbon emissions, minimizing waste, engaging with local communities where we can to contribute to, a more sustainable future. And part of that is education. We try to encourage people to understand the importance of looking after our environment. So, we kind of try to, we're trying to be proactive, and build a positive reputation, for want of a better word, with our consumers about what we're trying to do. So, from our clear statement is that we are educating, because I think that's important, we are always looking at finding different ways to reduce that carbon footprint. Whether that's in waste disposal, our lighting. We're all using LED lights and the like to reduce these things. So, I think the key statement is like every other company that's in this industry, we're all recognizing the importance of ESG and constantly looking at the best ways available to us to reduce our carbon footprint.
Perfect. And obviously make sure you watch Jon's presentation kind of on Recom's ESG kind of
Oh,
policies.
yeah, sorry, I didn't mention it. Yeah, I didn't want to say too much.
No,
Yeah, it is going to be about those three lovely letters, ESG.
Perfect. Make sure you get down to it, and I will put kind of the link to the solar and storage agenda into the description as well, so you can find everyone's presentations. One kind of topic that when I've been doing my research, kind of especially on kind of the solar industry, is the one thing that comes up is diversifying the solar supply chain. So I'll do a brief intro into this for those that aren't aware, and then I'm going to raise a question to you, Jon. So kind of over the last few years, China has, for the solar industry, luckily kind of driven down the price of solar PV manufacturing costs. This has subsequently led to manufacture of PVs kind of to move out of Europe, the US and Japan, and move to China, which has accelerated the green energy transition because price is lower and supply and demand has increased. But there is a kind of thought process that this in the long term will place strain on these individual supply chains. So kind of my question to you, Jon, is how can kind of other countries capitalize on this and create more supply chains? And do you think this will make a more resilient transition to net zero? Bit of a long-winded question, I know.
Well, let's try and give you this short and concise answer. Listen, I think the most important thing is, as with many industries, whether it was the textile industry or the plastic industry, China has been a bit of a goldmine because it has allowed prices to be kept to a minimum. And unfortunately, the people who run businesses, understandably, it's all about keeping your shareholders happy. So you're going to find the cheapest source of product, and China produces fantastic equipment and products. So I think that's been driven. I think from a Recom point of view, we have a factory in Lannion in southern France that was developed originally for two reasons: one, to supply the local French market, and more importantly, to supply the American market, because obviously America, with its sanctions with China and the various disputes it's had, are very conscious of buying Chinese product. I think there's an ESG comment that needs to be thrown in. There is some concerns over some of the places and the way things are manufactured. Just as Recom have done, and Recom are currently looking at a manufacturing plant, I believe, in the US, so that they can be more on site. I think European countries need to think about where they're going. Someone can correct me if I'm wrong. I think there's only one solar manufacturer in the UK. So that in itself, we talk about creating jobs, looking to the future, sustainable energy products. At some point, it's going to be good, and government grants being available for manufacturing plants to be put here in the UK. I use that statement because obviously the UK and ERA are my domain, but obviously the same could be said in other parts of Europe. At some point we've got to stop possibly looking at the reliance, because the other thing that has to be said, we talk about supply chain. China's a long way away. There's a lot of carbon footprint that gets thrown up into the air because we're having to transport it such long distances. So I think the answer to the question is that there needs to be government support. There needs to be a few entrepreneurial thought processes. But I think that what will happen in the next decade is that companies will recognize there are opportunities for manufacture within the European and rest of the world outside of China. I think that will happen. That will be the next phase. What I would also add is that we have to think about the components presently, because the majority of components that are made in solar panels, as an example, And if you then take that into inverters and batteries, we can only source the actual components in China. So there are a few more mitigating factors that would need to be thought through and considered. And obviously those components are one of those. So hopefully that's a very generalized answer to you, but just giving my thoughts, I think time will definitely mean that more people will think about setting up production outside of China. Whether that is in Europe, whether that's in the US, only time will tell. But there are clearly countries where they could do with some form of manufacturing setup, which is going to benefit them from an economic standpoint as well. So we'll have to wait and see.
Definitely. I mean, that was one of the best answers I've got to that question, to be fair, John. So thank you for that. I am very aware that I think our Zoom link is about to run out. So my final question. Obviously we've
go on.
No, go on, John.
Well, it was just you talking about supply chain, and I want to keep coming back to the UK because that's the bit. I was very fortunate to be invited to the Solar Summit a few months ago up in London. And I think most people will now be aware that the government, it's a cross-government sort of strategy to look at sustainability over the generation. And they set up a solar task force. I think the very interesting comment, which I'd like to just point out, is that there were three basic factors that were concerned about how the government were going to implement. Now, we already know they're behind. It's been well publicised, but their target, I think, is 90 gigawatts by 2035. Put that in perspective, Germany's is 230, I think it is, by 2030. So, it's not an unreachable target. The three things that are going to affect that are planning. Our planning processes are too slow, too inefficient. That needs to be tidied up. The grid, unfortunately, just is not good enough to support what we want to do, and that needs to be looked at, and that's a very important part. And the last one, which was mentioned, was resources. Now, at the time, I, like many others, we thought about resources being solar panels themselves or inverters, batteries, but also people. We talk about the fact that we've got skill shortages. There needs to be some thought gone into what the education will be as far as bringing skilled labour and non-skilled labour into the solar industry to meet these goals. So I just thought I ought to say that, because we were talking about energy transition and supply chain. These things are all factors. So there's a huge amount of talk. There's a huge amount of incentivization, supposedly. But to really make these things happen, someone's got to sit down and get the infrastructure right. Because without it, I always say, you don't build a house from the roof. You build it from the foundations up. So hopefully these guys will get their act together and think about how they're going to do that.
Definitely, and I've done a really good interview. It's not out yet, with Dr. Alan Whitehead, who is the Shadow Minister for Climate.
I spoke with him at the Solar Summit, actually.
Perfect. Well, in our interview, he touches on that, so I won't give too much away. But make sure to click that. I'll put that in the description as well. John, I don't want our interview to cut out unexpectedly. So
no.
I'm just gonna round off. So I say thank you very much. Thank you very much for your time today, John. And obviously a very good discussion. And please catch obviously John's speaking position at Solar and Storage Live, but also Panos Kapros's speaking positions. You've got Recom have two other speaking positions by Panos at the event. But John, thank you very much again for your time today, and see you at Solar and Storage Live.
I look forward to seeing you, Regan. Thank you very much, and keep yourself well.